If I had to summarize my review of the series in one word, it would be Gary. Hey there, and welcome back to Post Credits with Gil Garcia, where we go beyond the final scene of a television series now. After a 2-week-long hiatus, I've returned, and I've returned in a big way. Today, for the first time in this podcast's existence, we are reviewing a television streaming series. And what better series to review than Amazon's Fallout, the live-action adaptation based on the critically acclaimed video game of the same name from developer Bethesda Softworks. I couldn't be any more excited to get back to work and to start with Fallout of all things. In this episode, I'll discuss the best episodes of the series, the worst episodes, and why Fallout 3 still stands as my favorite video game of all time. Now, before we get started, I want to say that taking the previous 2 weeks off was completely unexpected. I needed the time to reset and get my mind right. It allowed me to take care of things in my personal life that required attention, and it actually sparked my interest in some other hobbies. Not to mention, more time to rest from the increased workload was a godsend. I've been working a lot more recently, and because of that, I just felt a bit overwhelmed. I needed a few extra days to myself. The Civil War, the 420, and the Challengers episodes all have sadly become casualties of the hiatus. Eventually, I will get a Challengers podcast out as soon as I can, as well as a lineup for what to expect for the month of May, so keep an eye out on social media for details to come. Over on the YouTube channel, I have a few things in the works, including my review for Furiosa that's going to be a video review coming up soon, and I also have another top 5 list that I'm working on. One last important announcement before we get to the meat and potatoes of the show. I have a Discord community. If you are a gamer, a film connoisseur, or a sports fanatic, I invite you to join the Discord community. I'll be providing a link to the server in the description of this episode, as well as on Instagram. The community has a little bit for everyone. Wrestling talk, hockey talk, film and music discussions, and there's even a channel where we can hunt down rare Mountain Dew flavors. It's a lot of fun, and I hope you come along for the ride. Now, brainstorming today's show was a bit of a task. I wasn't sure if I should keep to the traditional format of the show, which was Act 1, our expectations, Act 2, the review, and Act 3 was the reception and filmmaking factoids. Or there was another idea, which was breaking down the show episode by episode. Ultimately, I think I'm going to stick to the tried and true formula, but if you do want me to do an episode by episode breakdown in the future for any future series, let me know in the comments section, or let me know on social media. If you haven't watched Fallout, don't worry. I'm going to give first impressions spoiler free first on this episode. Then I'm going to go into spoilers as the review carries on. I'll make sure to note when spoilers are coming up. I really want to take the time in this episode to discuss the differences, the references, and the tie-ins from the show to the video games. So let's get into it. It's time to crawl out to the Fallout, baby. This is Act 1, Expectations. In a future post-apocalyptic Los Angeles brought about by nuclear decimation, citizens must live in an underground bunker to protect themselves from radiation, mutants, and bandits. Fallout is produced and created by Jonathan Nolan, Claire Kilner, Geneva Robertson-Dworet, and Todd Howard. The show stars Ella Purnell as Lucy, Walton Goggins as the Ghoul, Aaron Moten as Maximus, and Kyle MacLachlan as Overseer Hank. I'm not kidding you guys when I tell you that Fallout 3 is, to this day, my favorite video game of all time. It was the video game that opened my eyes to role-playing games and open-world sandboxes. My introduction to Fallout came in 2009 when I was in college. Halo 3 had convinced me to purchase my first Xbox, an Xbox 360. Halo was the game to play in high school. I would go to my friend's house after football practice. I would get dressed, go to his house, and we would have a LAN party for Halo 2 and then Halo 3. Halo 3 took my love and passion for gaming and elevated it into a hobby. It took it to an extreme height. From completing the campaign solo on Legendary to getting recon armor, I was obsessed with Halo 3. Halo 3 came out right as I became a freshman in college. It became one of my favorite video games all throughout the summer and well into 2008. Then we flash forward to 2009 when Halo 3 was set to get a massive multiplayer update and story expansion. The expansion was called Halo 3 ODST. A packaged game that included a secondary disc that included the entire library of the Halo 3 maps and content. Meaning that if you bought a copy of ODST, you didn't need the Halo 3 disc anymore because it contained the entire package of Halo 3 in it. All the old maps and the new maps were included. So, with that being said, it was time for me to retire my copy of Halo 3. So I took it down to GameStop, and this was back when the store was good, when it was in its heyday. The trade-in offer was actually pretty good back then too. GameStop ended up offering me $40 in-store credit for Halo 3. So I took the credit, bid farewell to my copy of Halo 3, and I looked around the store. I wasn't sure what to buy with that $40 since all I really liked at the time were sports games, Tony Hawk Pro Skater, and first-person shooters. The Fallout 3 Game of the Year Edition box cover was actually calling to me for some reason. I looked at the cover art and I saw this badass T-50 Brotherhood of Steel power armor just staring right back at me. And I decided, okay, I'm going to give this one a shot. It looks kind of cool. The Fallout 3 Game of the Year Edition was on sale for only $30, so it made a lot of sense that I would take my store credit and give it a go on this one. The sales advisor said that he loved Fallout 3. He reassured me that I made the right decision here. Keep in mind, I knew nothing about the game at this point, only that the guy in the suit on the cover of the case looked fucking badass, and that the back of the cover showed so many critical awards, including the 2007 Game of the Year award. It was a really big deal for me to sell my copy of Halo 3, since after all, it was something that connected me to my friends when I was younger. So to replace it, I had to get a game that was going to be worthy of Halo 3's stature. When I got home, I loaded the game up. I started through the introduction of Fallout 3, where it literally has you starting as a baby, as you discover your place in Vault 101. Right after the intro, it really didn't catch on to me. I was kind of like whatever about the game. It wasn't what I was expecting. There's a short little horror element there at the beginning where you had to escape some rad roaches, security guards, and then you make your way out into the open of the wasteland. But for me, I was just overwhelmed with how different the game was to my expectations. I guess I thought it was going to be a shooter, for example, but it was a little bit more than that. There were dialogue choices, characters that you had to listen to and talk to, choices you had to make. I probably walked away from the game shortly after that intro for about 2 weeks. I was on the verge of even returning it at one point, but something in my gut told me, hold off, let's give it another shot. This decision was one of the best choices I've ever made in my life. I kid you not. I'm so happy that I gave this game another shot because when I actually played through the rest of the tutorial, that very first step out moment, as they call it, when I left Vault 101 and looked upon the ruins of the Capital Wasteland, it was one of the most wonderful experiences I've ever had in gaming, one that I will always refer to as the moment where I fell in love with gaming. The pure wonder and beauty amidst the chaos, the excitement to look upon a building and know that I can go there immediately if I wanted to, and the eerie score of the game's music, it all swelled up and got to me. From this moment on, I was a vault dweller, looking upon the universe that was new to me for the first time. I didn't know the lore, the area, the enemies. All I knew was that in the moment, I was loving what Fallout 3 was putting down. That step out moment still gives me chills to this date. To go from being this angsty high school graduate hopped up on Mountain Dew, playing games like Halo, Gears of War, Call of Duty, and Battlefield, to slowing things down a bit for the exploration of Fallout, it was a pretty big deal. The game had this very distinct morality meter, meaning that your decisions mattered. Your choices have a direct impact on the factions, the NPCs, and the settlements that you come across in the wasteland. If you're an evil character, you will be vilified across peaceful settlements across the wasteland. If you're a good-hearted person, you will be idolized and welcomed by all. The brilliance of this system was that it invites the player to replay the game and see what the opposite outcome of what they decided on the first time will be. Naturally, my first playthrough was with high morality. I was a goody two-shoes, going around fixing everyone's problems. I completed the game, the expansions, and I collected everything you could possibly imagine. I even completed Moira's Wasteland Survival Guide, which is infamous for being one of the most elaborate and painstaking quests in all of Fallout. However, on the other side, as an achievement hunter, I couldn't just stop with one playthrough. In order to complete Fallout 3 to 100%, you had to complete the game at least 2 more times, with different morality each time. The evil playthrough was my favorite though. I nuked Megaton, got the Brotherhood wiped out by the Enclave, I left Harold, who was a mutated tree, alive to suffer to death. In its cruelty, I saw how brilliant the Fallout series was. I can replay the game dozens of times and find something new each time. My 100% completion of the Fallout 3 achievements board couldn't come at a better time though. Shortly after I completed the game, Bethesda and Obsidian announced a follow-up spin-off called Fallout New Vegas. If my obsession with Fallout 3 wasn't enough, Fallout New Vegas amplified it to an astronomical high. New Vegas was the pinnacle of Fallout's popularity. It took what made Fallout 3 so special, added new elements like a true companion system, gambling, and improved upon what was already established with the previous game. There were dozens of new factions, new mutated creatures, and an entirely different side of the United States of America to explore that we've never seen in the 3D space before. Because prior to this, Fallout 1 and Fallout 2 were just top-down RPGs, but still, to this day, I have the New Vegas Collector's Edition, complete with the Collector's Edition strategy guide. I have the playing card deck, the platinum chip, and the commemorative boxing. To a lot of people, Fallout New Vegas is the best game in the series. Despite not being developed by Bethesda themselves, it was developed by Obsidian, the team that would go on to create the Outer Worlds, which made this game even more impressive. It didn't just feel like a mod of Fallout 3, it felt like a true sequel and follow-up. Even though I didn't spend as much time in Fallout New Vegas as I did with Fallout 3, I enjoyed it just as much. Still though, Fallout 3 gets the edge because it was the first open world game that caught my attention. It's in the same tier as Mass Effect for that matter. Now we talk about Fallout 4. For a lot of hardcore Fallout fans, Fallout 4 is the weakest entry in the series. The story and the build quality took a major step back from Fallout New Vegas. Even though there were some loftier goals and ambitions implemented, things like the settlement building, the reworked faction system, loyalty missions, aerial combat, and the dialogue system were all extremely ambitious in making the game more in line with Mass Effect, Dragon Age, The Witcher, and other modern open world RPGs. A lot of people were turned off by that. To them, it didn't feel like a Fallout game, but to me, I didn't mind it that much. Still though, Fallout 4 was my least played game in the franchise. Even though I liked it a lot, I didn't play it as much as I did New Vegas and Fallout 3. I think those games sung to me a lot better. With a lot of people now joining the hype train for Fallout, Fallout 4 is quickly becoming the first introduction into the series, and I don't blame them. Fallout 4 now has a PS5 version, an Xbox Series X upgrade, but if you want to indulge in the world of Fallout, I still recommend that you start at the beginning with Fallout 3. I have to warn you though, once again, Fallouts 1 and 2 are not like the newer games. They are turn-based, top-down RPGs, whereas every game from 3 onwards is a first and third-person RPG with shooter elements. If you were curious about 1 and 2, I would say go in with an open mind. There is some really good world building and lore material in those games, but it's not as interactive as Fallout 3, New Vegas, Fallout 4 are. Then I want to talk about Fallout 76. Fallout 76 had a reputation for being the worst Fallout game ever made. It was an abomination. Within the first 2 months, the player base dropped to below 500 players. The game was the first Fallout multiplayer game, and it failed spectacularly. A lot of people were actually cheering for it to fail. They wanted Bethesda to shut down the servers. They wanted the game to end. But Fallout 76 has come a long way. Fallout 76 now is one of my more played Fallout video games because of the multiplayer aspect. Fallout 76 takes some of the things that I loved about Fallout 4 and implements them into a multiplayer game that I've never experienced before. It feels much more like Ark with the Fallout universe. Appalachia is a beautiful map. It's probably the most diverse map in all of Fallout's history, and I can't believe that not more people give it credit for what it pulls off. There are so many different biomes across the map that you can really choose to design whatever camp you want. But most importantly, Fallout 76 now has NPCs. It now has a thorough quest line. The seasons change and so do the stories. Fallout 76 is really good. It's in a really good place now, and I'm so happy that a lot of people are coming back to the game. I recommend, if you don't want to do a single player game, if you're mostly about multiplayer, then Fallout 76 is the one for you. I love Fallout 76. I'm probably going to play it after I edit this podcast. It's a game I play every single day, and it's with good reason. I love the series, and I love the multiplayer aspect. So, heading into the Amazon series, I wanted to temper my expectations. My love for this franchise is so deep that I didn't want to get let down. I've seen so many video game franchises ruined by incompetent filmmakers, writers who didn't want to play the source material. Halo. Oh god, that actually made me cough. And a studio that wanted to neuter the edgy aspects of the game in order to broadly appeal to younger audiences. I'm looking at you, Borderlands. Now, I did like parts of the recent Mortal Kombat movie. I very much disliked the Super Mario Brothers movie, and I absolutely hated what Paramount did with Halo. Now, don't get me wrong, the Super Mario Brothers movie is a fine movie for kids. That wasn't the fault of a studio not understanding the source material. It just wasn't a movie made for me. It felt a bit too juvenile for my liking, and I'm not really a fan of Illumination Studios. But the other two, Mortal Kombat and Halo, those are inexcusably bad. And the last thing I wanted from this series is to go into it hoping and expecting it to be as good as The Last of Us, but finding out that it was as unwatchable as the first season of Halo. The early set images got me hook, line, and sinker though. I was geeking out over the real-life version of the Red Rocket gas station, the Super Duper Mart, and the interiors of the vaults and vault tech. Aesthetically, they looked identical to what I had always imagined in my mind when I was playing the video games. However, this is kind of the same exact way that I felt about the first images of Master Chief in the Halo series. I got so hyped because of how accurate it looked, only to be let down. So with my history with Fallout as a base for this review, it's time that we stop talking about me and start talking about Amazon's live-action adaptation. This is Act 2, my official review of Fallout. So when it comes to adapting a piece of pre-existing art, whether it's video games, comic books, cartoons, and board games, there are two trains of thought. You either make a film or a show that is as accurate as possible, but possibly alienate the new audience. Or you divert far from the source material that it welcomes new naive audiences, but upsets the fans of the source material. To me, Fallout is a combination of both trains of thought. Not only does the universe of Fallout welcome the notion of new ideas that are so far removed from the video game stories, but they can coexist with those stories and expand on the lore as well. For me, the Fallout series surpasses HBO's The Last of Us for the sheer amount of world building that was necessary to make this whole project work. The Last of Us, although incredibly gripping and critically acclaimed, felt a bit too much like it was on rails, since it was a scene-for-scene recreation of the PlayStation video game. Here, this show is a completely original story that is grabbing references and tie-ins to Fallout 1, 2, and New Vegas. The setting of Los Angeles has never before been seen in a Fallout video game. We have traveled from San Francisco to the Mojave, aka Nevada, to the far reaches of the East Coast, Virginia, DC, Pittsburgh, Boston, and Maine. As a resident of Los Angeles, I'm a bit sad that it's not going to be used in a video game, but this is a very good consolation prize. In Amazon's Fallout, the story intersects between 3 central protagonists and a side plot about Vault-Tech's dark secrets. The 3 characters are Lucy, the betrothed daughter of Vault 33's overseer. She is called to action to find her father, who was taken by invaders off into the barren wasteland of LA. There's Cooper Howard, aka the Ghoul, a former television actor from pre-war America that has undergone intense radiation that has extended his life and mutated his physical appearance. And then there's Maximus, a lowly scribe from a powerful government faction known as the Brotherhood of Steel. Maximus is torn between duty to a faction that doesn't respect him and the desire to claim his own glory. The world of Fallout is full of colorful characters, factions, and mutated creatures. It's as quirky and hilarious as it is horrific and terrifying. For every joke about a jet-addicted junkie fucking a chicken, there's a twisted dungeon crawl through a dilapidated vault where the inhabitants killed one another off. Then they had to survive off of ass jerky. The humor is completely on point here. The horror, although it's used sparingly in the show, is very effective as well. And the connections to the video games, although there are liberties taken in some respects, is extremely respectful. Parts where the story has to retcon an event of the video games are hardly noticeable, but necessary to make the story work here. Let's first talk about our heroes of the story, Lucy, Cooper, and Maximus. Let's start off with Lucy. Lucy's nativity makes for the perfect fish out of water story in this cruel, fucked up world. She has spent her entire life inside of Vault 33, which is a fallout shelter that was built and designed by the corporation Vault-Tech. It's used as a shelter from the imminent nuclear war. Vault 33 is designed to replicate the modest and humble lifestyles of the Midwestern states like Nebraska and Oklahoma. They harvest corn, provide their own food, and even breed with their own relatives. Which was a hilarious twist I did not see coming. When she's thrust into adventure, she is so far out of her element. Ella Purnell plays Lucy wonderfully. Her face is so expressive and empathetic. Her beautifully bright eyes can really exaggerate the homegrown cornhusker fish out of water vibe. She has the ability to completely get overwhelmed by all the nonsense and chaos surrounding her, while also embracing the dark natural survival instincts of the wasteland. A couple scenes of her that I loved included a moment in the first episode when she first walks into a settlement named Philly. She interacts with a shop owner named Ma June. I also loved the very first scenes of Lucy and the Ghoul together, where he goads her into drinking irradiated water, then bites off her finger. Then she bites his finger off in return. Lucy is the quintessential Fallout protagonist from every video game. She serves as a representative of the audience into this wacky and violent universe. Lucy could have easily come off as boring and annoying, much like Cole in Mortal Kombat, but I found Ella Purnell to be absolutely wonderful as Lucy. I loved her character so much, and I think even non-gaming audiences can take away a lot from her performance and her character journey in this series. It's difficult to say that Cooper Howard, aka the Ghoul, is the best character in the show because I love Lucy so much, but it's hard to argue against the charismatic Walton Goggins. Throughout the series, we see Cooper's hardened transformation into a lawless gunslinger without a moral code. But his journey goes backwards. We see him as this heartless killer when he's first introduced into the series, that progressively becomes more and more sympathetic to Lucy and what she's trying to accomplish. His backstory is told by a series of vignettes of how he was before the bombs dropped 200 years ago. We see him shooting commercials for Nuka-Cola, Vault-Tech, Sugar Bombs, and he even stars in Western films. He has a child and a wife, whom the later shares many dark secrets of her own. And one aspect of the show that I really, really love is the fact that we're actually seeing the wasteland from the perspective of a ghoul, finally. I've always wanted Bethesda to implement a feature where we can choose our own race or level of radiation in the character creator suites of Fallout. Playing as a ghoul would bring so many opportunities to tell stories of bigotry and intolerance. You see, in this world, sentient ghouls are close to becoming walking zombies, known as feral ghouls. Society turns their back on them because of their rough appearance, their radiation levels, and the risk that they can become feral at any moment. Cooper Howard, who has been accustomed to people flocking to him in any room he's in before the bombs dropped, is now in a completely opposite place in the apocalyptic Los Angeles. Instead, he is hated and shunned by nearly every settlement that he walks into. On one side, Goggins can play this character's rough exterior extremely well, despite the massive amount of prosthetics he has to wear. And on the other side, he can portray the pain of losing his family and values. Cooper is a fascinating character in this adaptation because he presents so many narrative obstacles for Lucy and Maximus to overcome. He's very much a sympathetic anti-hero, whose moral gray area is a precise example of what Fallout is about. I love Cooper so much. Goggins basically steals every scene that he's in. He's badass, hilarious, and heartbreaking all at once. I'm definitely interested to see where they take his character in the next season. Now, if there was one weak part of the series, it would be the journey of Maximus, or Titus if you want to call him that. Maximus is an extremely frustrating character to root for throughout the first half of the series. In fact, Reddit is on fire over this character. As a squire, he is inexperienced, bumbling, and hopeful of one day becoming a knight of the Brotherhood of Steel. He often gets kicked, made fun of, assigned to perform grunt work, and is beaten by his fellow brothers. The tough love approach breaks this character. Instead of motivating him to ascend above the antagonizing, he looks for easy ways to get out. In the very first episode, there's this hilarious scene where he first acquires his power armor. I'm sure it completely subverted everyone's expectations of where this character was headed. He lies, cheats, steals, kills, and fails his way upwards throughout almost every endeavor, and you're never quite sure whether you can trust him to do the right thing. It makes for hilarious hijinks, but also some incredibly dumbfounded character choices. Because he steals valor. I'm almost also completely sure that I forgot his name was Maximus halfway through the series, up until the final episode, because he stole the name Titus from another Knight of the Brotherhood of Steel. Maximus's journey ultimately does leave in a great spot, and it encouraged me as we reached the final moments of the first season. But I'm not gonna lie, we had to get through some real fuckery in order to get to this true arc and purpose of his. I also don't mind the romance between Maximus and Lucy, because she's simply just a wholesomely naive character. She was rescued by this knight in shining armor, literally, on her first day on the wasteland. So it's only natural that she's infatuated with the guy. I would have loved to see a little bit more conflict between the two when Lucy ultimately discovers that Maximus was a fraud the entire time, but I think it was handled well enough to become a conflict in the next season. Another real strength of Fallout is the side plot involving Vault 33 and the inhabitants that they left behind during Lucy's journey. One of my concerns going into the show was seeing how they would fit the entirety of the lore into 8 episodes, the lore of the vaults being the biggest point of concern amongst them. In the context of the video games, vaults were designed to safeguard humanity from the imminent nuclear war between the United States and China. However, the twisted minds at Vault-Tec, the company who designed and manufactured these vaults, used each of the 120 plus shelters to experiment on people to discover the perfect society in post-apocalyptic America. Some of these experiments include a vault where one man is cloned hundreds of times and the only word he can speak is Gary. In Fallout 4, Vault 111 is a cryogenic experiment where the citizens of Sanctuary Hills are frozen until the vault reopens. These experiments range from the genuinely helpful to the downright grotesque and despicable. I'm extremely happy to proclaim that they nailed this aspect of the lore. Not only does the story unravel the mystery and the nefariousness of Vault-Tec perfectly, but it finds a way to organically work it in. The story behind Vault 31, 32, and 33, Norm, Overseer Betty, and Stephanie are a phenomenal way to introduce the audience into what makes these shelters so controversial. The vaults were always my favorite part of the Fallout series because I never knew what was inside them once we get in, and this show kind of explores that area. The finale of the season leaves us with just enough to chew on while not completely giving us all the answers. Norm's character arc is going to be incredible to witness next season. I'm predicting it now. He's probably going to become an overseer himself. Now, I'm going to go over some story spoilers for the games and the show before I get to my final verdict. So if you have not watched Fallout the series or played the video games, consider yourself warned. Pause the podcast, watch the show, then return when you've finished. That is your warning. I absolutely love that the show goes over the moral gray areas of the NCR and the Brotherhood of Steel. I've read quite a few comments from people who have vague knowledge of the series that the Brotherhood of Steel was their favorite faction. These same people came to me shocked and commented on the way that the show actually portrayed the Brotherhood of Steel, claiming that it butchered the faction. To this I say, play the fucking game. The Brotherhood and the NCR have always had hidden agendas behind their noble deeds. The Brotherhood is obsessed with technology and power. It's a mirror image of their main rivals, the Enclave. While the new California Republic, the NCR, seek to liberate and patrol the West Coast untested. The show does a really good job of portraying that neither is a heroic or good faction. They're each evil in their own right. It's in these lessons that Lucy's father, Overseer Hank, his own horrific past comes to a head. Hank, a relic of the pre-war Vault-Tec board, sought out to turn Vault 33 into a perfect slice of Americana, and in order to achieve it, he went through some extreme lengths to try and eradicate the surface's factions, with the NCR taking the blunt of it. The decision that Lucy faces in the finale is extremely difficult. Does she capture and kill the only person that she's ever trusted her entire life? Or does she take the word of a woman that she seemingly knows nothing about that holds all the skeletons in Hank's closet? To me, what's so important with Fallout, and it's why I think it's a better adaptation of a video game than The Last of Us, is that there are limitless possibilities for this show. They can take these stories in any direction. They're not tied to a single narrative. Lucy, Maximus, Hank, they all have never existed in the Fallout video games, and to get emotionally invested in their adventures in this twisted, fucked up world feels like I'm stepping out of the vault for the first time again and seeing the wasteland with a fresh new perspective. I don't think Fallout would have succeeded if it was a direct recreation of the main quest in Fallout New Vegas or Fallout 3 for that matter. The final frames of Season 1 leaves us with so many opportunities to explore New Vegas, the Mojave, and the canon results of the Battle of Hoover Dam, and I cannot stress this enough, this was a perfect first season. As a dedicated and long-term Fallout player, this show not only met my expectations, but it blew me away. This is the gold standard for video game adaptations. I'm sorry, HBO. Amazon got you there. From the opening shots of Sugar Bomb commercials to the appearance of Mr. House and the mines behind Big Mountain, I nerded out. I was completely surprised, and I could see myself watching this show over and over again as the years progress. Fallout, the Amazon original series, gets a resounding 5 out of 5 from this vault dweller / courier. Now remember, this is my first series review, so if I left out any important plot details or moments, make sure to let me know on social media or on the YouTube comments. I legitimately want to know how you all felt about Fallout. I also want to know if you're a veteran of the series. Have you played the video games before? Or are you completely new to the series? Sound off in the comments as well. It's now time that we conclude this journey into the wasteland with our final segment of the show. This is Act 3, Beyond the Final Scene. Since this is the first television series that I've ever reviewed, I want to put it out there that I know the reputation that Rotten Tomatoes has when it comes to audience and film reviews. I generally take each review with a grain of salt, although I especially get pessimistic when it comes to television shows on that website, since most end up scoring positive reviews no matter what. I do, however, agree with the massive critical praise that Fallout is getting. Fallout comes in with 93% critical reviews on Rotten Tomatoes and 90% audience approval. Critic consensus says that it's an adaptation that feels like a true extension of the games. Fallout is a post-apocalyptic blast for newcomers and long-term fans alike. I wholeheartedly agree with that. I want to go over some filmmaking factoids, but I want to temper the expectations here. Now, because this is a television series, I want to temper expectations that I'm only going to go over a couple filmmaking factoids. There are way too many references and production things to go over with this. Maybe perhaps I'll do a video about it, but today I want to cover some of the real interesting stuff. The first filmmaking factoid: Cooper Howard's fictional Western film, A Man and His Dog, is a reference to the Harlan Ellison's short story, A Boy and His Dog. This post-apocalyptic story of a boy and his psychic dog are a huge influence on the Fallout games, particularly the character of Dogmeat. I have not talked enough about Dogmeat. I love Dogmeat. I'm so glad they got him into the show. Next, the series is set within the same continuity as the video game franchise, but with an original story. Executive producer Todd Howard, aka God Howard, said he wanted to avoid adapting the video games, and I think that was the right call. I love this series because it isn't a one-for-one shot remake like The Last of Us. Now, despite Vault 33 existing in the same area that the first two games are set, Vault 33 is never seen in those games. While some erroneously regard this as a plot hole of the show, one of the game's designers from Fallout 1, Jesse Hennig, said that we didn't have a definitive list of vaults during development of the original game, and the creation of new vaults in Southern California for the TV show, 25-ish years later, is way outside of the scope of any of our planning. There are any number of reasons that the Master might not have any record of the vaults right under their noses, since there's no guarantee that the Master has access to an actual, complete listing of every vault. If you didn't know, the Master is the main villain in Fallout 1 and 2. He is not referenced in this show whatsoever. This takes place long after the original hero of Fallout 1 and 2 have killed him. This one's really good. If you call the Vault Tech number shown in the commercial, which is 213-258-2858, there's an interesting recording waiting for you. I'm not going to spoil anything, but go ahead and call that phone number and see what you get. Our next factoid is spoilerific, so once again, beware. In the final episode, when Lucy tells her father to enter the code for Moldaver, the code he inputs is 101097. The release date for the original Fallout game. Another neat detail I loved. And now for the final factoid of the episode. The first season ends with a shot of the New Vegas skyline, indicating that season 2 will at least partially take place on the New Vegas Strip. And there we have it, folks. That is my review of Fallout, the Amazon original series. If you watched the series, please let me know on social media. You can follow me on X and Instagram. Search for PCwithGIL. You could also follow the show on YouTube, where I'm going to be uploading a bunch of videos in the coming weeks. So follow there. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And be sure to leave a like and a rating. I greatly appreciate your support. We'll be back next week for The Fall Guy, starring Ryan Gosling and my wife, Emily Blunt. Have a great week, everybody. And as always, go watch a movie.